So it's been a while since me and Dave had a heart-to-heart. So today, I wanted to talk to you about the idea of, are we enough, right? Because that's something that I think, certainly over my life, has impacted the thought of whether someone was enough as they were or whether I was enough, has kind of impacted a lot of relationships within my life, whether it's with parents, whether it's with my own kids, whether it's with my ex-wife, those sort of things. So I kind of wanted to explore that topic a little bit, right? Because I certainly know, we've talked about meeting expectations before, right? And, growing up, your father might have had certain expectations of you and, how you were supposed to be and, whether it was academically or what sort of career you were going to have and stuff like that. And you kind of have a tendency to want to please people and do what they expect of you. And again, it's like, that's a way of you feeling like you're enough. And if you don't do that, then you're not good enough. And maybe you're not good, you don't deserve love and stuff like that, right? So I wanted to explore that bit with you. Like, what's been your sort of experience of that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like, particularly having children, right? We often attach like love or to them doing things that please us, right?
Yeah, like a checklist, right?
Yeah,
like do this, do that, and then you're worthy.
Yeah, right? Like they do things that please you, and it's good boy, good girl sort of thing.
Yeah.
When they don't, like, you're naughty, like.
Yeah.
And I know that's not meant as in it's not like I don't love you, but I think kids who are as children are very narcissistic.
Everything's about us. Yeah,
it becomes then they're not pleased with me. Like I need to do these things, to please them, so that I become enough for them.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, hopefully as you get older and you mature, you realize that it's not about love or what have you. There's things like discipline that aren't attached to that. But unfortunately, I think there are instances, and there's parents out there that do. Whether it's a conscious thing or not, they do attach, like, in terms of how they perceive like their child,
and then how they treat them,
how they treat them, according to what they do and what they achieve, and more importantly, if it's the things that make them happy, and they kind of almost exchange love for those things that they've gone on to do
and it can
and
be
achieve.
Simple stuff like it doesn't have to be like rewards; it can just be their attention.
Yes,
it could be like, if I'm achieving and I'm doing these things, then I get my parents' attention.
Yeah.
Whereas if I don't, then I don't. Right.
Yeah.
And I guess it's one of those kids. Some kids will just do what the parents want them to do, and some kids will then lash out and get attention in another way. Right. They get it in negative ways. Right?
Yeah.
But like, what about you? Like, in your experience growing up, was it a case of you felt very accepted for who you were, or did you feel like you had to be a certain way?
Yeah, like I was lucky that I had really good parents. That,
in case they're watching, yeah.
And I mean, I've got two brothers, and we're all very different, and we've all achieved different levels of success. And certainly, if you look back to, like, say, like academically, because I guess that's the early thing that's easy to kind of judge. Like my older brother, so he like did okay at school, but not great. Didn't go to university. I went to university. I was like the first class degree. And then my younger brother went. He got a 2-2, and yet my parents treated us all the same. Like, they celebrated he's getting a 2-2 and graduating as much as they celebrated me getting a first class degree. And like, so they never really. So I guess within that there was always a sense of, like, we love you in a way, like we don't, and they celebrate the successes. But I think I was lucky. I grew up, I think, in a family that accepted that we're all kind of born different, and just kind of encouraged everything we did to, like, just do the best you can do, and what's success for me is going to be different to what it is for my brother, and because it all depends on where we started from, right? Like success, when we think about success, it's like, well, for some people who have been born with some sort of crippling condition, success is getting through the day, right? Whereas for someone who's like super smart, success might be Elon Musk, right? But like it kind of depends on what cards you've been dealt. But again, like I think it's I think I was quite lucky in that it wasn't always tied back to. I never felt necessarily that I needed to do things to sort of be loved. At the same time, when I think of myself, I've always been quite a people pleaser, and I question sometimes where does that come from? Where does that that need to please people come from? And again, is that an underlying thing of like I need your validation to be enough, you know? And if I don't, if I piss you off or upset you in some way, does that then how do I see myself within that? And does that is it like, are you going to take that love away or that acceptance of me away if I don't do things that please you? And I don't know what the like subconscious thought behind it is, but I definitely know I'm a people pleaser. So I think there must be something in there that for me, perhaps is looking for some external validation, because I don't think I'd be a people pleaser if I wasn't.
I definitely think like for me, there was a couple of dynamics going on. Like my dad was very focused on academics, right? So he struggled, he came here in his 20s from Pakistan, struggled to get a job and like worked his way up to make some money and stuff. And he was always like, with my kids, I'm going to make sure that they get the best education so they don't have to have the same struggles that I did, right? So, and he was working a lot, right? So he'd come home from work and the only thing you want to know about is whether you've done your work, whether you've done your homework or whatever, or how you're doing at school. It's kind of all he ever talked about, right? So you very much knew as one of his sons, and there's three of us, I was the youngest and two olders. And you knew the way that you get dad's approval and love is by doing well at school, right? And, for me being the youngest, it was easy. I could see like the mistakes that my older brothers make and kind of learn from them and then not do the same thing. But the problem is, so I achieved quite a lot at school, right? I did like my maths early and stuff, and I got good grades at school, got into a good uni, etc. But what I didn't realize was that this kind of constant pattern in my life of feeling like I had to achieve to be loved by my dad, how that would play out in the future, right? And it's like now I'm in my 40s and I know I'm a workaholic, right? It's very hard to switch off from work. It's very hard to like not feel like I need to achieve in my career and like my business, for example, right? Making sure that I'm working hard to continue building and making the business more successful and stuff. It's a motivation that I have, which is great. It's good to be self-motivated and be able to push yourself and no one else has to tell you to do it. And I was really good at motivating myself as a kid. But it's kind of where do you draw the line where you let other things in your life kind of go by the wayside because you're too busy striving for achievement and success because of this workaholic mentality where you get the validation from the achievements that you make, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
And that's an issue, right? Because because then it becomes very fleeting, right? Like you get the validation and the sense of love, for that achievement, but then that moment's gone, and then you're back to square one again. And you see this a lot. You see this a lot with people in the public eye, like famous people, actors, sports people. They get all the adulation when they're performing, and in that moment they feel loved, and then they go back to the quiet of their hotel room or whatever, and they've got to deal with themselves, where and it's not or their football career ends, or they're not in films anymore, or whatever it might be, and all of a sudden it's back to right now. I'm not doing those things.
Yes. Yeah, so what box do I have to check now to feel like that again?
To feel like that again.
But I can't just feel like that all the time.
Yeah.
Just because I am who I am. Yeah.
But this is the whole point, right? So it's kind of you need to know that you're enough, right? And we all need to get to that point. Like we're born enough, right?
Yeah.
No one's ever looked at a baby and gone, right, until you start walking, like I don't love you. Like do you know what I mean? We've never looked until I see you learn the alphabet. you know,
Your times tables.
Your times tables, and do it better than anyone I've ever seen do it. You know, you don't. In that moment, it's just pure love, right? And that's who we are. Like we're born as like pure love, pure potential, and it's kind of knowing. And we all need to get to a point. I think it's constant work. Like, you know, often whenever we're chasing external validation, to kind of just sort of remind yourself that, like, I've gone unconscious here, and I'm chasing external validation to feel a part of me that feels like I'm not enough. But if you can kind of, and I think you need to meditate with it and sit there and get to that point that I am enough. Like it's so freeing. It's such a freeing thing when you can feel I am enough.
Yeah, and it's the point about meditation. The point about meditation is interesting because, like, there's definitely something in my brain that if I sit for half an hour and meditate doing nothing, I'll feel like I did nothing for half an hour. Not that I did something productive. It's this kind of addiction to being productive and feeling like if I'm not doing something productive, then what am I doing in my life, kind of thing, right? Where if you can just be still for half an hour, right, and literally know what it's like to be still and feel in your own body, there's value in that, right? But I think it's quite a hard thing for some people, certainly for me, to accept that. But you also mentioned about the baby thing, and I think this is really important, and this is something I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm struggling with it, but I'm certainly thinking about it right now, which is, we've talked about the fact we're both dads, right? And we're quite conscious about how we're parenting our children and the messages we're sending to them and stuff, right? And I very much want both my kids to feel and know that they are enough, right? And therefore, I don't want to recreate a similar scenario to me where they feel like they're only enough if they do X, Y, Z, right? They're loved unconditionally. They're enough as they are. Problem is, what I'm struggling with there is that I know that a lot of my motivation and self-discipline comes from that striving to achieve, right? And certainly for my son, right, who's the younger one, it kind of concerns me that the message of you are enough as you are, you don't need to change, you don't need to tick all these boxes or whatever, it can to some extent leave him with very little motivation to do anything, right? And I know as a man in this world, right, that it's quite competitive out there, right? And if you're not a man who's got motivation to make something of yourself and do something with your life and learn how to, fend for yourself, basically, right? Then you're going to struggle, right? So I don't want to inadvertently kind of remove that motivation or not even remove it, just like not cultivate that motivation in him so that he ends up having a much harder life because he doesn't know how to have ambition and drive and hunger for these things because he's enough as he is.
Yeah.
So what would you say to that?
Yeah, so I think my thoughts on that are, I'd always say, look, none of us need to be, do, have, or achieve anything to be enough. We're born enough. Like we're all, whether you're the billionaire or the street sweeper, right? We are all equal, and we're all loved equally, and we're all equally enough. And I always think with that pure potentiality, that's who we are at our core. That's the core of who we are. So it's kind of getting the idea that you don't need to go and achieve these things to validate that point. You are enough. Right. But I think once you do that, once that lesson's understood, it actually frees you up to go and pursue things that you're kind of inspired by, that you want to achieve without all the noise in the background, without being distracted by the, because it can often hold you back. You often, people battle against themselves because they're doing things where I'm doing this to prove that I'm enough. And it's the wrong motivation. It's the wrong energy to go into something. So
rather than doing it just because I want to do it.
Yeah, and in fact, if I look at some of the most successful people I know, there's a lot of people that I know that are super successful, and I think one of the things that those who have a really kind of good sense of who they are, and they're not trying to prove to everyone who they are. But it tends to free them up to really focus on you know what it is they're trying to achieve and do, because they've not got all the bullshit in the background of,
so they can be authentic to themselves.
They can be authentic to themselves. It's a little bit like it's a little bit like often, and you, so to your point around, you know, how much is this as the drive and the motivation that's come from that, you know, led to your success. And I think people get scared of, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be successful. But it's like, but I would argue that maybe it's actually held you back.
Interesting.
Because then you kind of battle against yourself, and you may be driving yourself in areas that you'd be better off. Like, I think when you're free of that, you then start directing your energy into the right areas, and life can flow and be a lot freer and easier. And then actually, like, it's a little bit like, you know, we spoke earlier around like law of attraction and things like that, and creating things. Law of attraction isn't about, do you know what, just sit around, meditate and feel a good vibe about what you want to achieve, and just watch the phone ring and things come in. It's still about taking action. In fact, you've got to take massive action, but it's about taking action in the right areas that feel right, that feel easy, not battling against yourself, right? So you go and take this big action, but then when you're in that flow state, like, you're taking action in all the right areas, and it doesn't even feel like work.
No, that's true.
You know, the again, really successful people, when you speak, you know, it doesn't feel like work to them, because when they're aligned with their purpose, they're inspired to take action. It doesn't feel like effort. It doesn't feel like, oh, I've got to do this, because it's coming from a place of inspiration, and they're flowing their energy and efforts towards things that actually inspire them and fulfill them. But if they're doing it because I'm going to do this because then I'll get love, then they might work hard, but they'll probably be battling against themselves and maybe directing their attention in the wrong areas. Whereas when it's like, I think once you give someone that solid structure of, right, you are enough, you are loved, you're now free to go and explore, and I think potentially do even bigger and better things, as opposed to someone who's, I'm doing this maths degree and I hate it. But I can do it, and I'm getting through it, and I think my dad will love me if I do this. But when actually your talent and what you should be spending your time on could lie somewhere completely different. So
what you're telling me is I should have been a DJ then.
You should have been a DJ. You should have been a DJ.
You know what, mate? Life's not over yet. Maybe you'll see me spinning on the decks in IB sometime in the not too distant future. All right, and then what about, you know, your friendships and stuff? Like, do you, because I don't have a lot of male friends that I have these sort of conversations with, right? Got a couple of female friends who I do, but I don't know that men feel overly comfortable to have these conversations generally, right? But I remember you mentioning to me a couple of times about, you spoke to some friends and it was clear that they didn't think they were enough, right?
Yeah.
You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. Like, I mean, this has happened a couple of times to me. Like, when, you know, again, because everyone like tends to be very stressed out, and they're living like, you know, and they're working so hard, and often, and I'm always interested when I see that. Like, okay, what's the motivation here? Like, and then, you know, when you keep asking why and everything, why is that important to you? Why is that important to you? And again, it's not about losing ambition, because you and I are both very ambitious people, right? But it's kind of about aligning the motivations, like, right? Because actually, if you can uncover like the right motivations, right, you often end up at a bigger why that actually drives you more than if it was something really kind of superficial. But often when I've had these conversations with a couple of friends, you know, often over a beer or whatever it might be, and when they're saying, oh, and I'm stressed with it because I need to do this, I need to do that, and it kind of, I kind of get to the point when I'm listening to them where I'm like, you're doing this because you don't feel like you're enough. And I've had a couple of like amazing experiences where I've said to that, just saying that to someone, you know that you are enough. And and obviously, you know, grown men cry because they've never been told that. They've never heard it. And in that moment, they've realized all that they're doing is to get that validation that they're enough.
But when
and
someone tells it to them, then they
Yeah.
can kind of breathe a sigh of relief kind of thing.
yeah, and it's
Yeah.
like, I mean, with so many of us, like we're all so impacted by our parents and how we're brought up through that. And so it's a real shame if you've had parents that were like shitty parents for whatever reason, that didn't like enforce that sense of, you know, love and being enough like within you. In theory, like as you grow up, like I kind of hope, particularly as you become a parent, you realize that all your parents are dealing with their shit. You know?
Yeah, they're not
it's
like
not
complete beings, right?
Yeah, like and hopefully, like if you have had a bad experience, you can get to a place of forgiveness as you kind of mature to go like, do you know what, they, you know, whatever they were doing when I was younger and what they were a shitty parent, but it was because they were battling their own issues. They were trying to find themselves, and they probably weren't maybe ready to be parents or what have you. But just because they're my parents and, you know, they made me feel like I'm not enough, it doesn't mean that I'm not enough, you know, because I am. It's just that was actually their failing. But unfortunately, they, you know, they're the first opinions that we you know, kind of face with, and for a big part of our life that are with us. So unfortunately, if we've grown up with that space of I'm not loved, you know, I don't feel loved, I don't feel enough by these parents, even when we get the, you know, objective, mature insight of, Joe, they were battling their own stuff. You know, deep down they loved me or whatever. But unfortunately, that kind of lives with us, and it sits in our that energy sits in our subconscious.
And that kind of projection of, you know, what your parents might have made you feel, like that works in other relationships, right? It's like if you're in a marriage, for example, right? If you make your partner feel like, if you're constantly criticizing them and pointing out their deficiencies and stuff, you're going to make them feel like they're not enough.
Yeah.
Right? And then that's going to manifest in resentment and things like that, and probably a breakdown of a marriage, right? So like, you know, you've got to be so conscious about the message you're giving to people in your life.
Yeah.
Who you supposedly love.
Yeah.
Right? Because do you love them for who they are, or do you love them for who you're trying to make them become? Right?
Yeah.
And take it from me, you don't want to do that, right? You want to, true love is where you love them for who they are, and you're not judging them, and you're letting them be themselves, their full authentic selves, and that's the best you can do.
Yeah.
Right?
Joe, as well, it's a really good point. When you think of like relationships, I'd always say to someone, you know, particularly someone who's a little bit lost, you know, someone who doesn't feel enough, like I'd always say to them, which I think like most people would like logically agree with, like, do you know what? Find yourself first. Like feel like you're enough first. Don't go and try and find it in someone else. Don't go and try and seek that external validation from a partner, right?
Yeah.
And I think most people go, yeah, that would seem a bit silly, right? If, you know, because then you're going to bring all these problems into your life, because then all of a sudden that, you know, I need this person to act in a certain way to make me feel a certain way.
Yeah, you become codependent, right?
Yeah. And then so when they're not making you feel that way, right? Because when you need them to act in certain ways to validate yourself and make yourself feel enough, when they're not doing that, then it pisses you off, and then you're getting angry because they're not doing it, and then you start projecting that on them, like you're the problem. You're the problem, and so it's kind of like, you know, you need to work on yourself first. But then when you can come like really aware of who you are. Then you meet someone that just compliments you. I don't need anything from you. Like we just, you know, we gel, and we complement one another. We lift each other up. But like, it's such a more fulfilling, amazing like thing. And that would go back to my point you say about your son. Like, yeah, if he thinks he's enough, he's not going to do anything. Like actually, it will mean that again, like he'll just be a lot more fulfilled in the things that he goes to do. Yeah, because he's not trying to
emulate your desires and your expectations,
and going after things to make him feel like that a part of him is missing. Yeah, it's a much bigger strength.
No, I appreciate your insights, man. It's always good to have these sort of conversations with you. All right, we'll call it a day for that one. But you know, I'd love to hear in the comments whether or not this stuff has resonated. Do you feel like you're enough? Let us know. We'll catch you in the next episode.